Good evening, everyone. I'm David Johnson of TransformEd Consulting, and you can see here my name listed, TransformEd Consulting, and my dear colleague Cassandra Williams' firm listed here, Educational Innovation 360 Degrees. And there is a list of all the services we offer. Thank you for being here this evening. And it's my pleasure to welcome our guest this evening, and it is Patricia Medina. Hello, Patricia, or Patty.
Hello, Patty. Yes,
How are you this evening?
I'm doing fabulous. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Tell us where you are in the world.
I'm in San Antonio, Texas, the best city in Texas,
Uh-huh.
or possibly the world.
Well, let me give you a proper introduction. Patricia Medina, San Antonio, Texas, is a scholar practitioner and an education advocate with over 25 years experience managing TRIO, student support services, and Title V developing Hispanic serving institutions programs, and directing academic success programs. Ms. Medina has served in community college and university settings, advocating for excellence in student support services, as well as developing opportunities for HSIs. She is currently researching how to increase student engagement and academic success, specifically in blended learning courses. Ms. Medina holds bachelor's and master's degrees in human sciences. She is ABD, all but dissertation, in her doctorate of psychology program in human and organizational psychology. She currently serves with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board as a strategic planning project manager. It's great to have you here.
Great to see you and be here.
Now, Patty, I've got lots of questions for you. Lots of questions. So let's go back to your bio.
Okay.
For those who might not know, tell us what TRIO is.
TRIO is a federal program that was implemented about in the 1960s. But what they do is, the one that I worked for was student support services. And what that does is to help students who maybe have either a disability, or whether that's a physical or a learning disability, or anyone who is first generation and who might be low income also. So the things that TRIO does is to make sure that the students feel that they're supported. It's hard for a first generation student.
Yeah. Well, it turns out that both you and I are first generation students.
Yes.
How did you get into higher education at all? Where did you start?
Oh my goodness. So it goes back all the way back to Arleta Lake University. I was getting my master's there, and I decided to look into a graduate assistant position working with a graduate admissions office. And so I started there looking at applications and making sure, reviewing their credentials and talking to them about, what the next steps were. Yeah, it was really exciting. I had a good time.
But I'm having difficulty connecting your degrees and your majors to higher education. Tell us how those things connect.
Well, my degrees are in human sciences. So human sciences, it encompasses a couple of things. You're talking about psychology, right? And then the educational background. So most of my bachelor's degree program talked about the psychology of learning, psychology of the emotional and cognitive. And then when I went to my master's program is where I brought in that educational background, where I did talk about curriculum and instruction, and making sure that I understood some of the past history of the education system also, so that when I was working with schools, I would understand the development and making sure that we progressed.
And you're a doctoral candidate now. I had to remember. Candidates when you've completed your exams and you're in the dissertation writing stage.
Yes.
So
yes,
tell us about your research.
Oh, my research. It is fully encompassing. So I'm doing the project part-time. But one of the things that I really wanted to learn is, after the pandemic, there were just a switch in learning. And we never quite caught up because everyone was just out of sorts during that time, of course. But one thing that I noticed just looking and working at St. Mary's University was seeing how students were having a problem with engaging online, with how to self-regulate and their learning. And so that was a factor that made me more interested. And so I talk about bringing in a lot of research um, Halverson and Graham, who talk about the cognitive, the emotional, and the behavioral aspects of student engagement.
Wow, this is going to be a great conversation you and I will have. Now, here's something that might be useful to just clarify. How is it you work for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, which is located in Austin and live in San Antonio? Are you riding back and forth every day? Are you flying? How are you getting to and from?
In my private jet. No. So I am actually commuting 1 day per week so that I can make sure that I am there for team involvement and when they have trainings available to us. But mostly it's all remote working. And talk about self regulation.
Uh-huh.
I really need to regulate myself in that time.
Uh-huh. So you are the personification of the results of the pandemic. When you speak about students and
Yes.
distance learning or hybrid learning, you are an example of it for working professionals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Wow.
it's been actually a really good transition. I really
Uh-huh.
enjoy the time and how my supervisor is actually doing our technical trainings and making sure that we're involved and we feel part. So the
Mhm.
belongingness.
Great, great. Well, our topic today is titled Strategically Planning Student Engagement, a review of higher education's culture. And we have four topics: strategic planning for student engagement, higher education culture, student engagement, cognitive, behavioral, and emotional learning, a shift in
Yes.
learning. Where would you like to start?
Can we just do the overview of strategic planning for student engagement? Everyone
Okay,
talks about that. We're always know that it's important for students to be engaged. Otherwise, we lose them. Correct.
okay. Well, it
Yeah.
just so happens I wrote my dissertation on strategic planning,
Oh,
so get
nice.
ready for some tough questions.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead.
So, one of the things, and I'm looking at an aspects in organizational. So I'm looking at one aspect to see how are the organizations responding to student engagement? We all know that it's an important aspect, but how are you responding to that? So, um, while I'm looking at it in blended learning courses, want to look at the organizational structure also. So, we need strategic thinkers. We need people who are also future thinkers because of the fact that when you're talking about strategic planning, you're looking at how do you develop those essential core functionality. So it is important that we look at what students view as important in their engagement. And right now, when we focus a lot on the educational technology, it's very high level and maybe not as engaging as maybe faculty or the organization might think. So it's important that the student is involved in those decision making processes.
All right, Patty, I got a bunch of questions for you right off the bat.
Yes.
You mentioned that we should consider what students think is important in regards to what curriculum or how they learn, their learning styles, the ways that they would learn best. What do you mean by what
Sure.
students consider important?
It's their engagement. So when we talk about student engagement, we talk about three aspects. We're looking at the behavioral, the cognitive, and the emotional. So those are the three aspects that you're looking at when you talk about engagement. So cognitive is all about their learning. How do we reach them to engage with the material? When you're talking about behavior, talking about self-regulation, you're talking about self-determination, self-efficacy. Those are the things that are going to make a student successful. And then when you're talking about the emotional aspects, you are talking about how does that student behave? Are they frustrated? Where are they? One thing that I know that has increased over time, especially after the pandemic, has been that search for mental health wellness and making sure that that students are addressing those concerns, and whether that's depression or anything to be like anxiety.
Mhm.
Those are the aspects that have become more and more concentrated on our campuses.
So when you say what students consider important, you mean things beyond curriculum and
Yes,
classroom activities.
absolutely.
Well, and speaking of that, classroom activities, with the topics that you're presenting, the topics we're discussing, where does the onus of consideration sit? Does it sit in the classroom? Does it sit in the student services building? Where does the responsibility for ensuring those things happen sit?
It's everyone's responsibility. It is in the classroom. It is the student's ownness, right? But it also is the faculty member's ownness. It is the administrator's ownness. Are we giving enough resources to our students and to our faculty and our staff? That we want to make sure that everyone plays a part. So this is a team effort. And maybe, some institutions or organizations do a better job than others, but we need to learn what our organization needs. So while we have great examples, we need to do research within our organizations to understand what is the value that we're taking from our own research and put it into practice.
Patty, you're a student-centered person, and then you describe yourself as a scholar practitioner, which I fully appreciate, meaning that you take the knowledge, the research, and you turn it right into action working with students. Given that background, what is student success anyway? Let's consider when we attended school, there was no student success office, but now
No,
every campus has a student success office. What is their role?
absolutely. So it's multifaceted. So you would talk about the Student Success Office could be part of the counseling, the mental health aspects. They could be the student involvement office. There's the aspects of academics and tutoring. So it's multifaceted, and oftentimes we work in silos instead of considering that the human centeredness of this is that all of those multifaceted uh, departments must work together. We cannot continue to work in silos.
Mhm. And you mentioned wellness and mental health. I read so much about students' need for mental health and even adults' need for mental health. This seems new to me. And then the other question I have regarding that is how do we know? Are we asking students, do you have a need for mental health? Or are we using actual assessments, tools that help us learn uh, or match symptoms to various documented DSM's mental health issues or mental health phenomena?
Right. Well, we need the professionals, obviously. We need those LPCs. We need those, or if you're an MSW, we need to make sure that those professionals are in the organizations because they do um, serve a better purpose than just the whole mental health aspect of the student. They are also engaging with the faculty and the staff and bringing concerns up and seeing, those levels of anxiety maybe reaching a level where it's a concern and we need to start addressing this. And how I want to go back to your first question. You said,
Mhm,
how do we know? And what is mental health wellness, right?
mhm.
So the student is not only the only person that needs mental health wellness, correct? We need the organization to be mentally well and
Okay.
healthy. But when you're talking about the student aspect, you're talking about them expressing things in classes or in their writings. And it depends on which level are you in, whether you're the community college and you're expressing that in a student development course, or if you're at the university level and maybe you're living in the dorms and the RA has expressed the concern for you. So those numbers are all reported. And that's how we know what the increase has been. Prior to the pandemic, it was there. It's just wasn't as reported as a concern as it is now.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's probably the best I've heard, explanation and clarification I've heard. Thank you, Patty.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
in speaking just now, you mentioned the health of the institution. Well, you've got that background in organizational psychology,
Exactly.
and one of your topics is higher education culture. What's your definition of culture?
Culture. So it again, another multifaceted topic that involves lots of things. You have the culture of the student, and then you have the culture of the employees, the culture of the faculty, and the culture of the administrators. So a lot of times, unfortunately, what we just throw the student into is this culture they don't even understand how to navigate. Um, and uh, and that happens, and they don't get that sense of belongingness. And so when they're put into a situation where they don't understand that they should be asking questions, that they should come with questions, or even know what questions to ask, it's our responsibility to teach them. We're all educators. We should be teaching, no matter where you sit in an organization. You are all or educators when you work from community college or university or any educational organization.
Patty, I'm going to go back now.
Uh-huh.
We mentioned earlier that both you and I were or are first generation college students. When I attended college, it was culture shock. And then when I went home the first year, that was Thanksgiving, it was culture shock again. to go home,
Right,
to
right.
be at home. That was culture shock. So I can appreciate what you mean by culture. Now let me go back to something you said earlier, and we discussed it, but there was a picture I had in my head, and we went a
Sure.
different direction. So here is that picture.
Okay.
When we want to take into consideration what a student thinks is important, isn't our responsibility to reacculturate students when they come to our campuses? I used the word earlier that the whole doctoral program I saw as a reindoctrination to knowledge. So part of higher education, part of education, period, is an indoctrination or an acculturation. So is it not our responsibility to say that it's important that you adjust to this culture of higher education?
I'd say yes, for a couple of reasons. One, we're educators, so we educate, and that is part of the responsibility is getting students to understand how to bring up their self-regulation skills, to understand that their self-determination is going to get them through. And there's the self-doubt talk that a lot of students have. So those are the aspects when you're talking about behavioral or emotional. But also we need to kind of address the fact that these students don't have a reference to work from, and we need to be the guide, if you will. And again, I firmly believe that anybody who works on a campus has that role, and whether they're working in IT. A lot of times, IT members don't think that they do anything, but they're showing them how to log onto the portal and learn the portal. How do you navigate the portal? Or maybe even how do I make reminders for myself on Outlook? Or how do I use the library? And the librarians showing you how to use the research um, journals, right? So
Mhm.
those are things that we need to help our students understand and navigate.
So then, what is, in general, higher education culture?
In general, it's a learning. It's a learning
Okay.
of the student, the unwritten rules, the behavior expectations, the cognitive learning that it takes to succeed, and the emotional stability.
Wow. That was good. That was good. Wow. Wow. See, as you spoke, I was thinking of what I do when I'm working with students. May I'll pat myself on the back because I think I did all those things.
Good. Good. I'm glad you did.
Yes. Well, thank you. That was good. All right, let's take your next topic: student engagement, cognitive, behavioral, and emotional. You touched on this a little bit, but what do you mean, student engagement and engaging in those three different ways?
Well, when you're talking about the research really comes from Vovolsky. I can always have problems with that name, but he's talking about how students learn, right? So that's where we started. How do students learn, and what are those subsections that are impacted? And so we talk about the cognitive, where the learning and engaging with material, engaging with faculty, engaging with their peers. That's important. It is a very essential key to success if you want to look at that in those terms. Because if the student is not engaging and they're not discussing the material in the courses and they're not talking to the faculty member and simply go and come, then what are they learning? Are they learning to take a test? Are they learning to regurgitate information? You really need to be influenced in a way that you can come back. And the best way that I learned, and you probably are one who learned this way, is if you can teach it to somebody else, then you know you learned your material, right? And so a lot of times our students, they're so focused and just getting an A on their exam, they're not learning. And so again, all these three things, cognitive, behavioral, and emotional, are about educating the whole person, right? So they need these skills when they're going to move on into their careers. It does not stop at the university or the community college level. It continues on in whatever career you have. And so it's important that you have stability in your emotional. So how do you regulate yourself? How do you not regulate. How do you behave? Are you frustrated all the time? Do you get angry? How do you handle those emotions? Is there any high anxiety? The other one would be the behavioral, the self-regulation, the self-determination, the self-efficacy. How do you deal with those imposter syndrome?
So, are you advocating that we teach students that, or that we help them navigate their way through those aspects
Right.
of engagement?
Right. I think it's everything. So it is about navigation and guiding them in their navigation, but somewhere, somehow, we have to teach those skills. And so whether that's at the K through 12, or we're using that as something that we do in our student development or, first year experience courses, that's where that learning should be taking place.
What would be the relationship between those three things, cognitive, behavioral, and emotional, and coping skills?
Yes, so coping skills would be the behavioral, right? They have to navigate how they're going to cope with either the increase in time of studying or the lack of resources, talking about money and financial resources. So how do you cope with all of that? And so again, going back to it, it's everyone's responsibility to absolutely know at least a little or enough to be able to refer the student to someone, right? When I worked for a TRIO, it was really, I was a director for TRIO Support Services at Palo Alto College. And when I worked for them, I made sure I had connections in every department. And we taught our students how to navigate that culture, who to ask, who was their contact person. And I would ask, can we be the TRIO contact? Can I come to you with questions? And can my students come to you with questions? And so they had a name rather than just a full department. And that person that worked in that department knew that they were going to get a vulnerable student if they asked for their name, and by name, right? So it was important that we communicate with each other and collaborate. If we're not doing that, then we're stuck in silos and not addressing the problems. And then we go back to, why don't they learn? Why don't they graduate? Why are those rates so abysmal?
Now you are indeed a student-centered person. Let me go backward for a moment.
Mhm.
Speaking of cognitive, behavioral, and emotional. Well, of course, I'm an educator, so I studied educational psychology,
Of course.
and I'm thinking back to the way our memories work.
Hmm.
And you asked the question, am I just learning this so I can regurgitate it on a test? What have you learned about the relationship between memory and emotion?
Yes. So it is a high impact concern, right? So if you're not feeling confident in your learning, and then you're going to get nervous, and so the anxiety will rise. Um, so the emotional aspect of learning is important in a couple of ways. It's not only important because you need to understand the information that you're being taught, but it's also about your safety, right? So that safety is everything. And if a student is in a situation where they're not safe and they're coming to school, then how can they learn? The other thing is if it maybe they feel that they don't that sense of belonging, so they're not going to engage. They're not going to ask any questions. They're going to simply sit there and hope, I guess, that they learn something. And they're not going to engage with the information being presented, right? Or even to remember how to recall that information and how to truly, truly learn what's being presented so that you can apply it. If you're not applying it, then that's not learning, then it's memorization. And that's not going to take you very far.
Thank you. All right, our last topic, learning, a shift in learning.
So it was talking about the whole aspects of pandemic. There is a huge shift in learning. And so one of the things is a lot of times when you talk about educational technology, you're introducing technology that a lot of faculty members and a lot of students and affair people and student support services, we're assuming the student knows these things. And so it's very important that we engage the student in their learning of the systems, right? So I don't know how many students that I talk to after they've graduated, and they're like, Where was that? We had these resources online for them, but they'll ask you and say, where was it? I never even saw it. Who gave me that information?" And we rely on email, and honestly, students aren't reading emails, and now they're saturated by text. So we need to be inventive and creative of how we address that learning. So it's going to take for us to get out of our comfort zone and start learning some new things. Again, going back to the whole research to practice.
Now, is this specifically related to hybrid or distance learning, or are you saying in every aspect of teaching, in person,
Right.
distance, hybrid?
Right. Exactly. So it's every aspect because when we do in person learning, we're still relying on Canvas or
Mhm,
Blackboard or something to put in material for the students, especially if you're talking about OER, you're opening educational resources that are
mhm.
available, then they're going to be online. Well, reading a book and reading um, an online document, it's two-way of learning.
Mhm.
It's different.
Wow. Patty, we covered a lot of topics, and for some, it might just blow their minds that there's so many things here. So, if you had to boil it all down to one takeaway, what would it be?
Um, I would say that the importance of engaging everyone in an organization in what learning looks like for the future is very important. And we need creativity, we need inventiveness, we need someone that is going to have that future to think to lead
And what do you
and
want
bring.
people? I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. And I just want to challenge everyone to step out of their comfort zone. And I want to make sure that you start researching. You don't have to be in a doctoral program to research. Start reading research, see what's out there, and see how you can implement it into your practice.
And I take it that was your call to action.
Exactly.
Conduct the research, find it, use it, apply it.
Correct.
Now, of course, we couldn't cover everything. So if someone wants to know more, how shall they
Yes.
contact you?
They can get on LinkedIn. They can simply find me there, or I have my email for Educator Studio M, and it's called Manifest, but it's M.
Well, Patty,
So
you've been a great guest. Patricia Medina is in
thank
San
you.
Antonio, Texas. She is working for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and she is ABD, all but dissertation. I wish you the best with your dissertation and with the wonderful work that you're doing with students. I'm with you
Thank you.
100%.
Thank you, sir. That was great. Thank you.